become something that's far less organic.
Yes, very much so. Very much so. It's looking at the structures of the clouds that are the most structured, and trying to overemphasize that. But yeah, they become flower arrangements in terms of that. There's a very ordered method that I'm constructing these things that is just aesthetically decadent. And for many years, those clouds were endlessly original. I mean, the sky always changes.
Right.
And I was always getting amazing different combinations. But by the time I did that mammoth 3-story cloud for the Omni in downtown Dallas, that was the last cloud that I made based on an actual photograph I took of the sky. And I actually made that by going to the construction site once I'd been given the commission.
Wow.
And taking a photograph from the Omni. So I could say that it literally, everything you're looking at came from right outside here.
Wow.
But that was the last time that I used a new photograph. I mean, I continued to work on commissions and pieces for shows that were based on earlier photographs.
Right.
But I became even more fascinated by going back to art history and thinking, okay, could I do the same thing with somebody else's skies that I could do with my own photographs? And so I started looking at paintings,
Sure.
and the very first one I did, and it took a number of years to kind of get it to where I was comfortable showing it, was I took the painting Christ's Blessing by Giovanni Bellini, which is in the Kimball. And I took that sky apart and digitally reassembled it. And that blew my mind in terms of
Sure.
how many skies I could raid of artists that I was a huge fan of and very influential on me. In fact, Bellini's skies... You roll down the list. Right. I just finished a suite of 6 skies based on the skies of George Ennis. And, he's a Hudson River painter, and a lot of these very bucolic landscapes. But you look at those skies, and they're positively apocalyptic. I mean, you get some amazingly bizarre colors in those. So
yeah, and that's always been the word on the Hudson River, is that there is this amazing, unique light that kind of washes over that area that, that for whatever reason, meteorologically, the light there is just different.
It is different. And it's, all these great artistic destinations that people talk about. Yeah, the light is different. And I did a show a few years ago at Talley's that was called Monday's Romances, Tuesday's Sad Affair. And I did a series of works that were based they were skyscapes and they were actually waterfalls. But they were all based on the notion of light being local and light being totally tied to its place of origin.
Right.
And so I took a painting, a sky from Hans Memling, and digitally dissected that and reassembled it. And then I did on the opposite wall, I did a sky by Giovanni Bellini. And then on the other 2 walls, I digitally took apart Church's Niagara from the American side and reassembled that. And so you had 3 different locales in this one room.
Sure.
And you could tell so amazingly that Venetian light, and if you've been to Venice, you see that light.
Right.
Bellini didn't pull that out of his ass. Neither did Church. Neither did Memling. If you go up to Belgium, you see the light that Memling saw, and it's been fascinating to me. This whole path that I can move forward with exploring the sense of this light being so influential on these artists, and then again that kind of connects back to photography itself, and It's funny because you think of the light in Provincetown and you think of the light in the Hudson Valley. The one place I've never got a good sky out of, and the light there is amazing, is Santa Fe.
Interesting.
I have taken so many images in Santa Fe trying to use them, and I just can't. It doesn't work.
Right.
And so, and again, it's like, why don't they work? I really can't explain it.
Interesting. Yeah, I know sometimes, I try to take an image of a sky and the photo will turn out lovely, but the colors are just a little bit off.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, especially now in digital where the camera is trying to make a lot of decisions for you.
Right.
But, taking a picture of a skyscape, it goes back to, there's some things that are unphotographable.
Right.
I'm sorry.
It's
unphotographable. And, sort of like the Grand Canyon. It's impossible to tell somebody what the experience of seeing the Grand Canyon's like, because a picture can never communicate that. And it's the same with skies. You go back to the great painting by Titian of the Flaying of Marsyas, and it kind of encapsulates what we all try to do as artists, and that's challenge the gods.
Right.
When you're trying to take a photo of this skyscape, or when you're trying to capture this landscape, you are trying to challenge the gods. You're trying to create something on a scale of beauty that you see in front of you. And what happens every time you challenge the gods? You fail.
Right.
And with Marsyas, you get skinned alive. But I think it's a great metaphor for what we keep trying to do. And when you see this sky, especially you as an artist, when you see this and you know what you're seeing, so why can't it translate? Why can't I translate that onto...
Yeah, and, it makes you more inclined to try to get into plein air. But even then, you can't put the paint down fast enough.
No, you can't.
That's the reason, Monet, would just kind of... Well, a lot of those guys just constantly, same time the next day, let's try to pick this back up where we were at 2 p.m. the day before. But
when you look at those there are Turner things that he painted out in the landscape where all he tried to do is get the colors right. He basically would do a color chart.
Sure.
And because that's all you could capture at that time. And then he'd, like you said, go out the next day.
He was so revolutionary. I mean, just, all the things that people try to attribute to the Impressionists in the 1870s as being groundbreaking.
No, he was the first Impressionist. I mean, literally, everything, like you said, that we give credit to the Impressionists for doing, he was doing that.
Right. The more I hear you talk about your work and what inspires you, it really reminds me of folks like Church in pursuit of the sublime.
I would agree wholeheartedly. I mean, I would say that's what I'm trying to do now. It wasn't what I started doing. It seemed to be what I was doing was the pursuit of the ephemeral or the unphotographable. I keep messing up that word today. Sorry. It's what happens when your mind works quicker than your mouth. But now I think it's the pursuit of the sublime.
Mm-hmm. And so, here in Dallas, we're lucky enough to have that amazing Church icebergs.
Oh my God, yes. I can't tell you how often I go look at that piece.
Right.
And how so few other artists I know don't. In fact, I've known contemporary artists. Again, I'll go back to Hockney. Hockney said that we live in a really dangerous age where we don't look back. Mm-hmm. All we do is look forward. And I know so many artists that don't look at anything historical. I know this artist that I've known for many years who travels a lot, and when he went to some places, I was like, oh, did you go to the Prado? Or, oh, did you go to, this? And he said, oh, I don't look at the old stuff. And it just broke my heart. I mean, number one, I gave him a look like you're shitting me. But number two, it was like, there's so much to learn from artists that have come before us. We can't just set a flagpole from where we are now and say, okay, we're moving forward.
Right.
It's the same reason we learn history.
Sure.
We learn to learn from what has come before us.
Sure.
And I think I have more overtly mined that territory than a lot of other artists, especially Texas artists. And I would give some enormous exceptions to that. I think Bates has been a master at a scholarly examination of certain artists and learning from them and somehow creating something absolutely original.
Sure.
John Alexander is good at doing that too. But there's so many artists, they go from fair to fair and from contemporary gallery to contemporary gallery, and they get a very sort of horse blinders view of art making. And I tend to think that when they go back to their studio after going to Anton Kern and every other gallery, they go up to New York all the time and they're in all the contemporary galleries, but then they come back and they start making art that to me is almost inbred.
Right.
You're
sure.
Yeah.
I've heard artists in conversation like this talk about, be questioning, okay, well, what is your day like? Well, I get up, I have my coffee, and then I spend 45 minutes going through Instagram, looking at other people's art to find inspiration.
Oh God. That is so profoundly sad to me. I don't know where to, oh God, no.
Right. And so
when I look at Instagram, I'm looking at dogs and pigs and animals and vegan food.
Right.
And to me, that's kind of it. That's
right. But, I feel like it's, there is a balance to be struck there somewhere in terms of, knowing the past, being able to pay, I feel like, really clever art even pays homage to the work of the past, while still being able to speak in a contemporary vernacular, right?
You have no choice but speaking in a contemporary vernacular. Your art cannot be anything but contemporary. Right. And so if you choose to borrow aesthetics, your work is still contemporary. It makes me sad that artists can't see that.
Right.
My advice to a lot of artists is, at one time I was going to all the art fairs. Mm-hmm. At one time I was going to all the galleries. At one time I had a huge studio in the design district and, was going to all the openings and doing all that. And you know what? I made the worst art I've made in my entire career during those periods. That studio I was miserable in. Mm-hmm. Trying to keep up with the Joneses, art-wise, looking at other art and, coming back from Miami and going, okay, everybody's using pink this year. Right. It was almost like this sickness.
Right.
And I have found out that the more I turn my back on the contemporary art world and trust my instincts, mm-hmm. and trust my experience, because, I'm 52 now, so I get some bitching rights and some experience rights from being that age. And the more I draw on that stuff and the less I look at what's being made around me, the stronger work I make.
Right.
And the more unique work I make, and the work does not, even if it doesn't fit into what people call the critical discourse, it does eventually.
Right.
And it's stronger work, and it's work I can feel more proud about. And it's not riffing on, formalism or, mm-hmm. What are all the zombie movements that are going on right now,
Right. And so, but it's a matter of finding your unique voice. And
that takes years.
Right.
It really does. There are a lot of artists that have hit fame really early, mm-hmm. with a really unique vision, and then they spend the rest of their lives trying to keep the same dying show on the road.
Right.
And they're afraid to take risks. Mm-hmm. My big influence in my artistic career has always been David Bowie. Mm-hmm. Because, and in fact, a lot of times the people who have been really influential on me have not been visual artists or photographers even. They've been musicians or composers. But Bowie would take an idea just as far as he could take it, mm-hmm. and then he'd break everything down and start from scratch again. And I find that beautiful in so many ways.
Right.
It's the opposite of what I call the Lichtenstein syndrome.
Right.
When you look at a Roy Lichtenstein from this period and you look at a Roy Lichtenstein from 50 years later,
sure,
it's the same goddamn painting. I mean, and he was a good artist. I'm not Lichtenstein bashing.
Right.
But he had a lot of success doing what he was doing, and I'm sure that there were probably other ideas in there that he was afraid of exploring.
Right.
I love artists like Gerhard Richter.
Absolutely.
I have such an enormous respect for him. Obviously,